So this is a great pleasure for me to introduce Gautami Palanki. You are an architect with a vision for buildings that create health and an experience and innovate for climate action. I remember you were in the original team that created ARC-Scoru, a data-driven environmental performance scoring platform, where you currently lead product development and global implementation. Gautami came to this role as a leader in high-performance architectural design, sustainability reporting, green building certification, and technology implementation. And last year, you have left this organization, this ARC-Score, which is a subsidiary, I think, of the Green Building Council US GBC, to join a new corporation, Howard Hughes Corporate, or is it charity or corporate? I don't know. But now I let you introduce yourself and maybe talk about your new position at Howard Hughes Corporation. And please continue and make your presentation now.
Thank you so much, Bruno. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, perfectly.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. I'm so excited to be here with you. I'm sorry I couldn't be there with you in person, but I hope you're having a wonderful event. I heard some of the presentations online, and I think it's going to provide so many ideas for you after you are out of the conference and in the real world. Give me a moment while I share my screen and we can get started.
Yes.
Bruno, can you see my screen?
Yes, okay? Wonderful. It's full screen, so you can continue now. We can see your presentation now.
Wonderful. So since there are a few students in the room, I definitely wanted to share my story a little bit about how I was an architecture student in India, and now I'm in sustainable development. It wasn't magical. It wasn't overnight. It does take a certain amount of resilience to be in the sustainability industry, because you're constantly swimming against the tide, right? You're reminding everyone about the ways things can be done differently, and really change is not easy. So my name is Gautami. I am the Senior Vice President of ESG Strategy with the Howard Hughes Corporation. I'm currently based in Washington, DC. The reason I couldn't be with you today is this tiny 7-month-old arrived in our lives earlier this year. And it's been a joy to watch a new human being grow, learn, and just be fascinated by the world around them. It's also made me think about the world a little bit differently. I think previously I would think about sustainability as a passion, because that's what I wanted to do. That's how I thought buildings should be. Every building can be better. How do we make it better? With the arrival of my daughter, who you're seeing in this picture, there was a very different way to explore the world. It wasn't as much about the passion, but it was about the urgency with which we need to do the good things and make the building, make the world a more sustainable place. And so with that, when I joined the Howard Hughes Corporation, I could see that there was so many opportunities to make the quality of life better. So just taking a step back, when we think about carbon in real estate, it's a bit of an unknown concept. Folks don't understand what that is, and it's not their fault because it's invisible. and so you can't see carbon, you can't touch carbon, and it becomes very hard to communicate to people in buildings, people managing buildings, how to make them better. Because when we think about real estate, you think about the way you want to live, work, and play. When you think about water, you think about a pool. When you think about activities and greenscape, you're talking about the areas for recreation, the areas for entertainment that people use. When you're thinking about, energy use, you're thinking about, the buildings that you go on a frequent basis, your home, your school, your office. And so as you think about the lifestyle, that is exactly what it comes down to in terms of carbon. We need to measure a lot of the things we're doing to determine how health and wellness are impacted in the real estate, in our real estate as we think about carbon. So this brief video is about one of our master planned communities called Summerlin, which is in Las Vegas. And that is one of the many master plan communities that Howard Hughes Corporation has developed. We are the US nation's largest developer of master plan communities, a total of 118,000 acres across the nation. We are in Texas, Nevada, New York, Maryland, Hawaii, and Arizona. Many different states with many different kinds of climate, many different kinds of climate risks, many different kinds of energy grids. And really what that comes down to is different ways to manage, track, verify, and reduce carbon. When we talk about these master plan communities, they also are homes to many different people in each of these states. A total of nearly 400,000 people live in the communities and really contribute to how they use the real estate in these communities, which is how carbon is produced in the communities. So let's get into it a little bit more. Thinking about carbon, we can think about it in different ways because there are many technical aspects that go into accounting for carbon. The first and foremost are the natural systems and ecology. What do you already have in place that helps sequester the carbon? And then what do you improve to make it better? So for example, most people think about trees or vegetation, biodiversity as a nature-based solution to lower carbon. That is of course true. And what you'll see is, for example, using our master plan communities as an example, over 25% of our communities are preserved green space. So forever, these will be trees that will continue to improve air quality, lower urban heat island effects, and continue to sequester carbon. It's also not just an environmental aspect. It's also a consumer aspect. As we think about the business of real estate, the number one amenity that homeowners look for is access to nature. So when you're providing access to nature, such as trails, parks, etc., you're providing two impacts: an environmental impact to reduce carbon, and of course, a consumer impact, which is to improve your business. Carbon is also a component of transportation and land use. It's about how you design and plan the cities of tomorrow and how you commute within those cities of tomorrow. As we all know, biking and walking have the least carbon footprint. However, we also know that with significant distance, you can't walk and bike everywhere. You might have to take public transit. At the end of the day, providing this sort of increased infrastructure needs to start with a plan of the city. So when we plan for alternative modes of transport, we are automatically identifying the way to reduce carbon emissions from transportation and land use. Another component is water. Typically, we don't think about water first when we think about carbon emission reduction. However, everything we do can be tied to carbon back. For example, the extraction and the commute of water from its source to where it's used definitely has a carbon impact. And of course, there are many parts of the world that are water scarce. And so just as we think about carbon as a global impact, water has a global impact as well. Energy. This is definitely the first thing that comes to mind when we think about carbon use reduction. And that's fair and fine because it's a more direct correlation. When we lower energy use, we lower carbon emissions. And we can get into that a little bit more. It's a little bit of a complicated subject, as you all know, because the energy conversion to carbon is dependent on many aspects. Number one, where did the energy come from? Number two, how was the energy produced there? Number three, are you using energy efficiently? And number four, are you making sure you're tracking and reporting on that consumption? Of course, the best form of energy is a renewable form of energy. And we're seeing that across the world, there has been an increase in renewable energy sources, from wind to solar to all other forms of localized renewable energy source. I will also say this is the most challenging component of a carbon roadmap in real estate. A lot of the buildings that we're looking to lower carbon emissions are already built. And with those operational buildings, you really have a certain amount of minimal control to improve the performance of that building. So for example, it may not be financially feasible to completely switch out the mechanical system in that building. However, there are always ways to lower energy use in the building, whether it could be by simple upgrades like lighting retrofits, basic changes such as making sure your building starts and shuts down on time, and of course, common sense approaches like, is the building running on a holiday? Is the building running on a weekend when no one is in the building? The second aspect of energy and carbon is the source of energy. When you draw energy directly from the grid, you're dependent on what the energy source is for you. So for example, here in the US, depending on which state you're in, the energy source might be different. So for example, in New York, which is where this picture is from, a lot of the energy is driven by hydro. So it's renewable energy and has a low carbon footprint. However, in places like Hawaii, the energy use has a very high carbon footprint because it's very coal-based and has a high emission factor. So depending on where you are and how much energy you're using and where the energy is coming from, it will have an impact on your carbon footprint. There's increasing conversation around the carbon in materials, the materials we use to build our buildings. For example, concrete and steel are significantly used in the construction of our buildings and include high amounts of carbon. So on our end, we look at ways to reduce this carbon in two ways. One is in the design of the space. What amount of structural components do we need? How can we make them skinnier and structurally safe to reduce the quantity of materials in the foundation, in the enclosure? This will reduce the amount of carbon. And then, how do we design our buildings more efficiently so that in the long run, the carbon produced by the building is also minimized? This is a very unique opportunity when we're developing new buildings to make sure that they are carbon efficient from day one, and we can reduce as much of the impact upfront before the building is operational. All of this comes down to innovation. How do we do things differently? How do we manage for carbon from right up front? How do we engage different people in this conversation? Because really, it's not a one-person effort. When you design a building, the structural engineer, the architect, the MEP engineer, everyone needs to be involved and collectively innovate to make the building more carbon efficient. But at the end of the day, it's really about improving the quality of life. When we reduce carbon, we reduce pollution, and we're making the world a better place for everyone to experience. And so I encourage you to think about carbon not just as an invisible commodity, but really a way to measure, enhance, and improve the quality of life. So talking about the details a little bit, the Howard Hughes Corporation, as I mentioned, is a developer of master planned communities in the US. We look at our real estate business in three components. First, master planned communities. Second, new buildings. Third, operational buildings. So we are long-term holders of our asset, and we continue to manage our properties as we develop them. And to give you a scale, our largest master planned community is in Texas. It's called the Woodlands. The Woodlands is about 2.5 times the size of Manhattan, New York. So any picture you've seen of New York, it's 2.5 times the size of that. We're building new buildings almost every month. And so we have a significant portfolio that's growing in size. And then we continue to operate the buildings we built. So we have a large portfolio of office, retail, and multifamily. So we are a diversified, publicly listed company that is committed to minimizing its environmental footprint. So I'm going to walk through the carbon roadmap for our organization. Step one is measuring carbon. Where does our energy come from? What is the embodied carbon in our new buildings? And what is the operational carbon in our operating assets? These are the main components of measuring carbon. Next, tracking carbon. We need to be able to understand where we are to manage its reduction. We can only manage what we measure. And so for tracking carbon, we look at the power use in each of our master planned communities in each state. We track the design and construction materials that are coming into our new developments. For example, the use of local and regional materials lower the carbon impact of a new development. And then in our operational assets, we look at resource use and efficiency. There are constantly ways to reduce energy use in a building, and there are constant opportunities to do so. If anything, the pandemic has showed us that buildings can be run differently, the minimum amount of quantity you need to run a building. And all of these are wonderful lessons learned that can be implemented going forward. Now that we've measured our carbon, the next step is to reduce carbon. And this is where data plays a really, really key part. You have to be able to quantify how much carbon is generated in each of these assets, find a way to track it, and then manage it on an ongoing basis. I can't emphasize enough how much data is needed to track and reduce carbon emissions. Let me pause for a second and give you an example. So within the Howard Hughes Corporation, when we decided to track carbon across our portfolio, it involved many stakeholders. The building operators and engineers, of course, building designers who are designing the new buildings, the utilities who provided us with the data, software providers that help us track, automate, and manage the data, consulting services that help us identify which building needs to do what to reduce its energy use. And then at the end of the day, this data needs to be translated and communicated to the occupants in the building, because they're the ones using energy and really need to support carbon reduction. So the data is really the truth behind how you're tracking carbon, how you're reducing carbon, and how you will continue to do so to achieve the goals you've set for the organization. So the more accurate the information, the more verifiable it is, the more trustable it is, and really is a clear definition of your improvement in your portfolio. You also need to take into account that the carbon reduction needs to be verified by a third party. And so at Howard Hughes, we are independently verifying our progress every year through different frameworks. Across our portfolio, we use the Science-Based Targets Initiative, SBTI, that helps us set the goals that are required for the real estate industry globally to reduce carbon emissions. Once that's done, when we build new buildings, we look at LEED, which is a green building certification framework, to help us quantify and confirm that the level of carbon reduction has been met in the building. And for operational assets, we look at Energy Star, which is the US EPA's program to benchmark energy use and then verify the energy use reduction in our assets. So again, as you think about developing a carbon roadmap for a real estate portfolio, the first step is to determine what the portfolio consists of. Second, to find ways to measure the carbon impacts in every business segment. The third is to set up ongoing systems using data and technology to measure. And fourth, to verify the reduction through industry-based programs. When we think about industry-based programs, I would recommend looking at global programs such as LEED and SBTI, because it offers a global benchmark of how you're performing. And that's the true sign of leadership, because as we all know, carbon does not know geographical boundaries, right? Carbon emissions anywhere are carbon emissions everywhere. And so every single building needs to do its bit to reduce carbon goals and for us to meet the Paris Agreement as a global community. So at the end of the day, how are we doing? At Howard Hughes, we produce a report every year. We've done so for the last 5 years, where we transparently report our progress towards our commitment to reduce carbon emissions. We talk about how this impacts our community, our business, and of course, the planet worldwide in each of the efforts that we take. A part of this is to really showcase ideas that have worked for us and ideas that may not have worked for us, so that anyone who wants to see, understand, and observe for themselves what it means to lower carbon, have a document to look back at. This is publicly available. So for those in the room that would like to look at our ESG report, it's available on www.howardhughes.com. I do want to pause here and reflect back and say it's a journey. You have to start somewhere. You have to start today with where you are, and then take incremental steps towards reducing carbon. The first step is not always easy, but it is required, and the requirement is very urgent today. So I encourage you to talk about carbon, learn about carbon, and maybe discuss with the person who's sitting right next to you at the conference how they might have conducted this journey on their own. It's an ongoing process. Every year, you're going to make a little bit of progress towards a larger goal. And across the world, we're seeing real estate companies set goals. It might be 40 or 50% carbon reduction by 2030 and net zero by 2050. And so to achieve any of those goals, we have to start today. And all of this has a very positive impact on whatever it is that you do. So here is an example of what we are doing from an environmental social effort at Howard Hughes. We look at different ways to celebrate every kind of holiday there might be. Many people attend these events, and it's really a way to showcase how we come together as a community, whether it is to have a great time or raise money for beneficial causes. We look at biodiversity, whether it's understanding the path of migration of birds to butterflies and other species that might need our help and care. We speak to students and young people about how they could understand what it means to save the environment and what sort of skills they might learn along the way. We find ways to celebrate local and regional products because the lesser they travel, the more effective it is in our carbon journey. We look at ways to make sure every individual voice is heard because there are many stakeholders that contribute towards this collective goal. At the end of the day, this is really a celebration, whether it's Earth Day, Arbor Day, or every day. There are different ways we can continue to encourage people to be more conscious. We recently conducted a farmers market where we taught students the environmental benefits of growing locally, selling locally, and buying locally. Health and well-being is really the impact we are looking to achieve. When we build a better planet, it's a healthier planet for everyone. So I hope that video illustrated for you the business impacts of being environmentally responsible. As we think about real estate, it's not just about buildings, it's about the spaces between the buildings and everyone who uses those buildings that are a part of this effort. Whether you're thinking about carbon reduction, energy reduction, water reduction, health and wellness, every single person needs to be involved. And they need to be involved every day. Every single step needs to be a part of the behavior change you're looking to educate and create awareness about. And that message needs to be repeated over time in this journey of carbon reduction. As we think about 2030, as we think about 2050, that's many, many years of engagement that every single person needs to undertake. And again, it's not hard, it can be very fun. So when you have a cake, you cut it into pieces and everyone enjoys it. That's a little bit like a carbon strategy. You develop a holistic carbon strategy for your entire portfolio, and then you divide it into pieces that people can understand, share, learn about, and then enjoy at the end of the day. So I encourage you to create this carbon cake for yourself and find ways to share and celebrate with everyone around you. I was very excited to be a part of your conference program. You're welcome to reach out to me after the event if we couldn't get to discuss your question. But again, our ESG report is available on howardhughes.com, and I'm on Twitter at Gautami Palanki.
Well, thank you very much, Gautami. It was a very interesting presentation you did on data use in management.